There's an old Zen story of two monks that were walking across the bridge. And the junior monk said to his teacher, he said, "What is the Buddha nature?" And the older monk picked him up and threw him in the water. You know?
Seagal did his first film in '88. This was in '86. And he was teaching Michael Ovis, apparently, and his son.
Yeah.
And he'd bought into the story, CIA and Deadliest Man Alive and all that BS. And so he got him an article in the LA Times, in the entertainment section. And of course, I read everything from cover to back. And then there, like I said, he was very disparaging. And so I just thought he was rude. And I thought he was of no character. That's when I gave him a little call and said I was going to come over and chat him up. And so that's the thing I feel sad about.
Well, and I actually think it's sad because his first three movies, he was electrifying. You know, his ability.
Hard to Kill and all those.
Hard to Kill, I think, is a terrific martial arts movie. But he has the charisma, but it just dissolved into ego and him, and then. You know, you don't want to disparage people that...
Well, you know what I heard on the set of from the guys that he works with, the stunt guys around, and I'm sure you could comment on this, Bob, for sure, is that he was hurting the guys. He broke a guy's arm, you know, and some of the stunts that he was sort of choreographing with them. And I heard through the grapevine, talking to the guys, you know, like he's awful rough on those guys in those movies.
But that's exactly the point. Anybody that's done stunts in movies knows the objective is to make it look as real as possible, but to not hurt your partner.
Right.
Now, if we're doing a fight scene and you hurt me accidentally, I accept that as part of the risk. But if you intentionally hurt me, and when we create a fight scene, you know, you tell me what you're going to do, that's what I'm expecting, and you do something totally different. It's very easy to break somebody unsuspecting. And so I have total disrespect for him for that reason, because he does hurt these people. And then if they object, and some of these stuntmen can kick his ass, but they don't because they won't get a job. Right. For example, Gene Lebell choked him out on his second set because he was hurting the stuntmen, and so they set him up, and they said, oh, and they know Gene's the world's toughest man. Nobody has ever beat Gene Lebell, ever. Created MMA in 1962. He and his mom owned the Olympic Auditorium. And so anyway, oh yeah, they owned the Olympic Auditorium. And so Milo Savage, who was a professional boxer, was kind of a early day thug, I guess, and people in those days, this was when the fight happened was 1962, but the malarkey started in the 50s and the early 60s, and people would say, I'm a black belt, so he'd knock him out in a bar or whatever, and so he assumed there were a lot of people claiming, you know, talent when they didn't have it. So he made the mistake of offering $5,000 to anybody, martial artist, that would get in the ring. Well, in those days, in the 50s and 60s, the only way you made money in martial arts was teaching. There was no competition. Okay, wrestling, yes, boxing, yes, but no, not in martial arts. So he made the mistake, and when I heard about it, and I told Ed Parker, and we told Gene Lebell, and Gene, I say he would kill his grandmother for $100. Imagine what he's going to do to you for $5,000. But we tried to get the fight at the Olympic Auditorium, and they wouldn't allow it. And so we wound up doing it in Salt Lake City. And so the guy comes in. By then he'd studied Gene a little bit. So he comes in and kind of spandex underwear and 500 pounds of Vaseline. And so it took Gene a few rounds to get the Vaseline off. Gene came in wearing a gi, and he'd have to change the gi each round to get more Vaseline
keep
off
absorbing
of him. So he could get a hold of him. But in the early part of the fourth round, he got a hold of him, and he did a crotch grab and across the shoulder and picked him up, body slammed him, and I thought he killed him. But Gene is the world's toughest man. Nobody's ever beat him. And he's 85, and he's still, every Monday night, he's at go-kart school. So if you think you can handle it, go on down.
I would not advise you to try it.
But anyway, with Gene Lebell, he was on the set, but he wasn't doing fight scenes. So the stuntmen are getting hurt, so they go to Steven Seagal, and they say, hey, he was always telling everybody he's the world's toughest man, which he's far from. And I proved later he's not even in the top 12. It's called The Dirty Dozen. But a magazine I did.
I would like to know who is in the 12, though, when you finish this story.
I shall. So at any rate, they said, well, do you know who Gene Lebell is? Well, you know, if you're in martial arts, you can't not know who Gene Lebell is.
It's like asking a Christian if they know who Jesus is.
Hello. Amen. So anyway, they said, no, that bald fat guy down there, he's the world's toughest man. So of course bald fat guys can't kick your ass, right? So he went down and tried to get Gene, and Gene was probably eating a tuna sandwich if I know him, and he was tough on a tuna sandwich. I say you don't get to 260 if you let people steal your food. But anyway, so Seagal kept harassing him about, you put me in any holes you want, and so he finally said, okay, son. So he just put him in a front choke, a basic choke that we teach, and he choked him out. Gene's sense of humor, he put his face close to his rope, which was hidden behind a big zipper. And so when he woke up, he didn't know what had happened, but all the stuntmen were laughing. So then he kicked Gene in the groin. Well, we'll let you kick us in the groin, but you got to ask us, you know. And so that made Gene mad. And so this...
Seagal got up and kicked Gene in the groin?
He kicked Gene in the groin, yeah. And so that was like a fly landing on his shoulder. So now he put him down for the count. So the story goes that, yeah, I gave him yellow in the front and brown in the back in his underwear, so he know how to put them back on.
So that's the story's
absolutely true.
Huh?
30 stuntmen watched it.
Yeah.
It's funny because that's
a very famous story.
That story
only
comes.
There was an iPhone back then.
That story comes. Yeah, right. And that story comes in many different versions. Yours, I'm guessing, is the authentic version. But from Steven Seagal saying it never happened to people around Gene saying, "Oh, it happened, but Gene can't tell you about it." And I didn't hear anything from Gene about that.
Gene's got a letter. Seagal's attorney sent him saying, you got to deny it. And he said, no, it really happened. And I got 30 stuntmen. So his lawyer sent back a letter to Seagal's lawyer and told him an amount of money that they had to pay him, which he did. Mm-hmm. And he'll keep right on with the story. But there's 30 stuntmen saw it, so there's no doubt about it. And I don't blame them.
Your road to redemption is paved with tombstones. No quarter, kill all masters. Go to noquarterkillallmasters.com. Rated R.